morning. Welcome to Easier Habits Live, your favorite 8 a.m. Central business live stream. I'm Alec from Easier Habits.
And I'm Meg. I'm a global English communication coach.
All right, so the end of a long week of being sick.
Oh my gosh.
But we've been getting back into work. Meg, you did a talk yesterday.
Yes, I did.
And I got some of the backstory before that. I don't know if we'll go into that, but it was funny. Sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have brought that up. But anyway, and I'm getting back into how to continue to fund some of the extra effort we want to put into marketing. And so to bring in money rapidly and consistently, I might have to go back and pick up coding, and I'll maybe talk a little bit about what makes that difficult and how I approach learning challenging situations, especially when my brain is being really stupid post being sick and sleep deprived.
Right.
So I can talk a little bit about that process. But first, communication tip.
All right, communication tips. So yes, I did do a presentation. I was, I can't say like I was a keynote speaker at a blah, 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 but there was a networking event and they asked me to speak and I said, of course. And because I like talking. So I went and talked about how to make your business more approachable for an international audience, because I knew they were going to be mostly native English speakers. And that's kind of the take I go on with that particular audience. But the communication tip for today is something that I found incredibly useful, which was as the event was getting set up, I went around to all of the different tables and introduced myself. There's like 25 people there, and asked them, what are you expecting here? And most people said not a lot. Most people said, I'm just here for like networking and stuff. But there were a couple of people who really sounded interested in learning about things. They weren't sure what they wanted to learn, but they wanted to learn something. And so even though I didn't get all that much from that particular thing, it had a couple of different fallouts. One, they sort of knew me before I was talking. So they weren't just like listening to this random person. I'd said hi to them before and they're like, oh, okay, we've met her. So that already adds that initial piece of engagement, which makes it easier then for them to listen when I was actually like giving my content. But then I think the other thing that did, because I had some people talk to me about this afterwards, was it got them thinking about what they were trying to get out of it. So it was more for them, honestly, that they were more mindful of what they were doing there. And they weren't just like sitting there passively. They were thinking, well, what can I get out of this? Okay, awesome. And so it helped them key into what I was saying even more. And it brought up some really good questions afterwards as well, because they were primed to think about what they wanted to learn. And if I hadn't covered that, then they could ask the question. And so we had a really good question and answer session at the end, I think largely because of that. So the communication tip is prime your listeners as much as you can. I know it's not always possible to, do it if you're in a huge setting with a lot of strangers, but have people think about what they're there for, right? And if you know that, then you can adjust accordingly, but also if they know it, it's going to be more effective for them.
Yep. So that's great. And this is great for personal study, actually, having a question, like a specific goal of what you learn. Like, so for coding, to get into that, a lot of people just read stuff and learn like next to nothing. Mm-hmm. And the next tier is people will like go to tutorials to follow the tutorial and just do whatever the tutorial says. But like there's no specific goal. And again, they don't really learn as much. They spend a lot of time doing random things, but like they don't really remember or retain as much because they didn't have a question to start with, right?
Yep.
And then the third type of person is someone who specifically picks a book or exercise or something to learn about a particular problem or question or practice something. So
yeah.
that like our whole brains are purpose oriented, and so if you have a purpose to your learning, you're going to learn a lot more.
Yeah, and you don't always know what that purpose is going into any given thing. So I mean, I really feel like church is kind of what taught me how to think of those questions, because when I was younger, they said, come with a question in your mind and then listen to the message and, it'll be answered. And I'm like, well, I don't even know what I don't know. I don't know what my questions are. So I just kind of sit there and feel like I'm not learning anything because I knew all the basics and I didn't know enough to have questions. But as, I thought about what my questions might be, right? Just the act of thinking about what my questions are then helped me think of questions. It's kind of amazing how that works. It seems like duh, but at the same time, I had to actively think about not having questions in order to get the questions.
Well, your brain doesn't like not having answers. It will manufacture answers.
Yes.
And that's one of the tricky things about your brain is like, the first answer might not be the best or whatever. And that's one of the reasons why there's like the 7 whys exercise. So like you ask yourself why 7 times. And so, if you want to do something I'll probably get more into this later at the end to come back to this, how to decide what to do. But like the first answer of what you want to do, even if it's accurate, is probably simplistic and not really aligned with like what you really want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to understand that, you keep asking yourself why, and your brain will come up with reasons if you give it enough time. If you're not used to that, it can be a little slow at first, but it's really interesting what you start to get to at levels like 5 to 7.
Well, and the hard thing I think for a lot of people is they have a question and they're like, oh no, their brain starts to panic. I don't know something, so their brain wants to fill it in because it's uncomfortable, and then they come up with whatever simplistic answer or whatever.
And then
they're
you
like,
just repeat it.
Okay, I'm done.
Right.
As opposed to really interrogating that and going deeper, because it's uncomfortable to not know stuff, right? People don't like ambiguity. And so we're happy to accept the first thing that sort of works. It's like, okay, well, I'm good. I don't have to worry about that now. But for real learning, right? And that kind of deep learning that causes actual like behavioral change and changes in your brain, you really do have to go deep into it. And it's hard, but once you start learning how to do that, I think personally that it's really fun. But I also recognize that, I like falling down rabbit holes of questions and like, well, but what about this? And then, but why is that? And how does this connect to that thing? That doesn't seem like it's related, but it is. Yeah. So.
Well, and I think your curiosity often tends to be like, I want to know about this external thing. And even the way you talk about questions is like, well, I don't have a question about that. And whereas I'm always like, I always have a question because I'm always having issues with my life. They're all internal, right? And so I'm always struggling with something. And so I am always actually sifting through all the information out there just to see like, is this relevant to helping you with marketing? Is this relevant to, how I invest money or, earn money to invest, etc. Like all of those things. Is this relevant to me calmly dealing with kid temper tantrums? Is this relevant? I have all these sort of problems. And so like they generate, whenever I come into contact with something, they pretty quickly generate some kind of question for me.
Well, and I'm so used, and I love that. So you guys can see we have 2 very different learning styles, right? You start with the questions and like learn all of the things, trying to find the answers to the questions. I learn stuff just for the sake of learning it because I like putting stuff into my brain. It feels really good, like eating the best ice cream ever. That's what learning is for me. And in that process of learning and then a lot of reflecting and things like that, I come up with the questions and I eventually figure out how they can solve these. But one of the reasons why I don't start with the questions is, there's a whole bunch of reasons, but a little bit because of learned helplessness, a little bit because I am very, I don't want to say gullible, but I believe what people tell me. I listen, like I defer to authority, like teachers tell me something and I say, okay, sounds great. I believe you. And so I didn't have that like need to interrogate and question the stuff that was told to me when I was younger. And that's a skill that I've started to learn, in my adulthood. And I feel like I've gotten pretty good at least, when I hear something, not taking it at face value and thinking, well, but what are the different sides to this? Or, what might some other iteration of this look like, or something like that. And the point is with all of this is neither of those is bad or good. It's just the way that we work, right? And so finding the way that you learn, I feel like, is really important. Whether the information comes first or the questions come first, they're both important. And so, yeah, as well as the like acting on those, kind of like we've figured out with this marketing, I can learn all I want about marketing, but until I actually try to do it, right, I'm not going to be able to see all of those blind spots.
And it's helpful to have a consultant to, guide you through that and be accountable. Yay. So, great. Was there anything you wanted to say about the talk yesterday or research?
Let's see. Talk yesterday was awesome. It's one of the things that I haven't done a ton of public speaking like that. But when getting like all of the good feedback that like people were like, oh my gosh, that was so helpful. And it was like a half hour. It wasn't, a lot of talking, and I had way too much content because, I could talk for hours about this kind of stuff. But also, having it confirmed that this is also a need on the native English speaker, business side. It was, motivating, but also recognizing, and I think one of the good things was I had gotten this all set up back in November, right? If someone were to ask me to do this like today, it's not my primary focus. Obviously I follow through on my commitments, but this came from November when I was like, I'm going to try all the things. And so as far as like the specific marketing towards my avatar that I'm working towards, the Japanese side, it wasn't particularly helpful. Although I do, I am optimistic that, something will come from it because it was enjoyable and I got a lot of good feedback. And there's a couple of people who asked me to potentially talk at their future events, which I could get paid for, which would be cool. But the other thing was I was able to go in there actually thinking about my avatar, right? My Japanese, business person, and think about what things I would want to tell other people to help them. And in doing that, I was able to think more about their problems.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of abstract, but basically
let's frame this a little bit more, because you're talking about it. But so the talk that she gave was about on global English to entrepreneurs who are native English speakers, how to speak more simply to a global audience, right?
Yes.
And so this is the reverse of your typical avatar situation. Normally you're talking to a Japanese business person on how to access English markets.
Yep.
Right? And so this is kind of the reverse.
Yeah.
But one of the ways it relates is that you are teaching other people how to connect to your avatar.
Yes.
And so there was some work at developing empathy for your avatar, thinking through that, etc.
Exactly. And that right there was a huge thing because, as much as I love that word empathy, right? Because as much as I say, I know what, these people need or whatever, we've talked about how, what they're searching for and what I think they need and what they think they need don't always match up, right? And so how can I meet them where they are? Because again, that's what communication is, while then helping them to see what I think is going to be useful for them. And then we can kind of work together with both of those things, because maybe they do need what they're looking for. Or if they want it, okay, right? It's not about what they need, but if they're looking for it. So with Japanese people, a lot of them look for pronunciation, even though accent is not the hugest thing, right, in communication, but it helps them feel more confident. So, okay, I can meet them there, right? And then bring in my other stuff. But what was fun too was I was able to take all of the stuff I'd learned, from this process of kind of learning about my avatar and, think, okay, well, what would I want to tell, this American market so that I could help those people that I'm trying to help feel more comfortable with an English speaking market. And I had some great questions from people like, well, how do we let people know that like it's okay that they're not native speakers? And I'm like, yay, this is good. And so it gave me ideas kind of for future stuff, as far as like I could like, I mean, I'm not like a connector person necessarily, but I could potentially offer the service to Japanese people of connecting with these people, right? Mm-hmm. Which would help them in their businesses, the Japanese people in their businesses, and Americans would get the experience of working with more international people, as well as the Japanese people getting into this market. So there was a lot that came from that. I'm still kind of digesting it all in my brain. Especially since I also have a marketing call this afternoon with our consultant, based on the questionnaire that I filled out this week. And we're going to be able to get kind of the map of my funnels and my process and all of that.
I think that'll take a week or something or so of research.
Yeah, I think today we're just going over the questionnaire and talking about that. But, there's a lot of things in my brain right now.
Yeah. So, a lot going on there. My primary work, again, so there's a certain amount of, like, to build my business rapidly, I'd have to be a whole lot better at marketing, and we're investing in her marketing first. So what I'm doing to build up extra income so we have money to invest there is going back on coding, because usually it's pretty quick for me to find a coding job, and I can I can take out all the time I'm spending on marketing, which is unpaid time, while I'm learning that, with this particular job, which will be helpful for the short term, mm-hmm. right? And then hopefully all the things we learn from marketing with you, I can then apply to my business, right? After we've grown yours. So, but I have to get back into coding. And the tricky thing about coding is it's not just like learning one language. You have several different libraries that have different ways of doing things. And it's not just learning one library, it's how several of these interact. And so I very quickly got to a place yesterday where, so there's JavaScript. I'm using actually technically a language on top of JavaScript, so a modified version of JavaScript. I'm using a tool to build and combine files, and then I'm using, there's a node server thing and a library on top of the node server that's commonly used called Express. So there's like 5 different systems going on there. And so, error messages and debugging has gotten a whole lot better over my lifetime. But with 5 different systems interacting, it is very possible to get an error and not know in which particular of those systems is triggering that error, like where you went wrong. So what do I do? And especially, since I've got, poo brain from being sick, not getting a full night's sleep any night this week.
So hard.
And so, you just trying to do my best. I do want to work, and getting back into that, and how to avoid freaking out that, oh no, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, no, I ran into this kind of stuff all the time as a professional coder. And so, especially when you're setting up stuff, right? Because once you've got it sort of working together for the most part, until there's some problematic update that breaks everything, and then you have to refigure out how everything works together. Once you get a system going, it kind of runs, and you can just modify it and tweak it. But how you break this down is, one, that's too many systems. So if you can't figure out a problem with 5 systems, try and figure out what you can pull out and isolate is how a programmer does it. And so I'm running into this error on the server. I think it's server, the modified JavaScript, and the build system, like somewhere between those three, right? So maybe I'll start a fresh project with just those three and see if I can recreate it, and then maybe even delete what I did in the other program and start again from scratch. Because that's the other thing is, after you cut out systems, right? Try and cut out as many systems as you can. Then you can also simplify it by like starting from scratch. That's another thing where people often, it's kind of like the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
You put a lot of effort into something, so you want to save that. But if you're really struggling with something, a lot of times it's better to just start over from scratch. And if you want to get better at something, in fact, it's best to start over from scratch repeatedly. And so this is, one of the things that I'm, going to do, since I've had a hard time with the setup of projects. It's not something that, if you are my kind of coder, you do a lot, because very often you're maintaining a large system that somebody already has set up. So like people very quickly get rusty at it. But like starting small projects from scratch actually is something they ask in interviews a ton. Even though most people are working with libraries, etc., rather than starting stuff from scratch. So it's like a really good experience for interviews to start from zero. Like, all right, I got stuck. All right, I'm going to start from scratch with fewer things, see how far I get.
Yeah.
All right. And if I get stuck again, try it. Like, all right, if the modified JavaScript server and build system doesn't work, could I just do modified JavaScript and server, right? And there's a way that I can, work without the build system, just those two things. Can I get the server to work in regular JavaScript, right? You kind of like break it down until the problem is simple enough for you to solve, and then you start adding stuff back in. But the same thing can be done in business. The problem, with marketing is there's so many things that go into it. There's a creative aspect, there's a research aspect, there's the technology aspect. And so, there's writing, there's visuals, there's psychology. And so, sometimes, one of the reasons why I think some people get their starting with content is because it's like marketing, but without some of the concerns. You don't have to worry as much about sales, right? You can, in marketing, marketing general is big. There's lots of things you can do, but if you're producing content for a specific platform, very often there are like specific generic constraints, etc. And so, I think that's an example where a lot of people learn and build their platforms initially just by putting out content regularly. And that starts building up some of the writing and audience skills. Yep. And the interesting, here's a great, actually, real example of that. I was listening to an interview with Mr. Beast, who has some of the biggest, most watched YouTube videos.
Really?
Yeah, like ever.
I don't know anything about YouTubers.
So like he's one of the biggest, right? And it's interesting, like listening to him, he didn't really intellectualize stuff. Like it's not a YouTube, like his success isn't because of brilliant ideas. And again, like I'm always like process over ideas. We always think if we knew the right ideas or whatever, that it would save our business, but it's really process. And he spells out his process, which is every day he looks at the highest rated videos on YouTube. That's it. This is process. It's that simple. It's kind of like almost stupid simple. But like when he does that, he'll go in depth. Like he's looking at what is the thumbnail, what kind of stories, how do they phrase the title, etc. Like he's looking at a lot of things, but like that's how he builds his sense of what is right, what works and what doesn't. Yeah. And when he talks about it, like he's done it so much. We've talked about this earlier, the difference between novice and expert. Like it's so intrinsic in him. He doesn't like analytically break down. He just like sees a movie and knows they're doing this thing wrong. Yeah. Right? Because he now has years of looking at and analyzing the most popular videos on YouTube. Yeah. Well, and you can do that with so many skills. Like that's one of the things when I was just like basically tutoring English, high school students, I would take a sentence, or I would, like have us look at a sentence that the student client had written
and then, talk about like, okay, well, it's a little clunky, or it's a little bit awkward, or it's a little bit too, tell not show. And my, students would have no idea how to fix it. And again, part of that was they're non-native speakers, and they're also like 16. And so, my ability to help fix that comes from my, 20 more years that I have in life on top of them of experience, as well as being a native speaker of English, as well as reading so freaking much that I have all of those different examples of good language in my brain. And so I'm more able to find those patterns that, would constitute good language, or at least, get them a better grade at school. And be able to show them like why, this right here is better than that. And a lot of them are like, oh, your English is so much better than mine. I'm like, of course it is. I'm in my 30s, and like I've studied this really, really hard because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, but it's not just studying the whole thing. Like
it's
the and specifically, this is the point I really don't want to get lost.
Yes.
Is that if you want to get good at football, for example, you don't play entire football games over
Yes.
and over and over again.
Yes.
You break it down into what are the core parts. The running, the throwing, the tackling, right?
Yeah.
You practice those pieces, like the core pieces, over and over and over again. You break it down into a simpler problem that you can practice 100 times as much, because you wouldn't get nearly as much practice if you were trying to do the whole thing all together at once, which is what a lot of people do. They're trying to eat the whole cow at once.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what I have to do as a teacher with English is, I'll take a novel, right? And then I break it down into like themes and symbolism and all that kind of stuff. But then I'll take like a certain passage and I'll break down the language of that passage. What are the vocabulary words they're using? What are the structures? How do they do the things that they do linguistically? And, down to like word by word sometimes. And I think it's that ability to really pick things apart, right, that most people don't have. They just expect to be able to do all of it. So not trying to do all of it at once, doing all of the little pieces and then putting them together, right, and seeing how it all fits. So
yeah. Don't digest the novel at once if the reading a passage is difficult, right?
Yeah.
And like a lot of people, it's people want to skip to being an expert, right?
Yeah.
If they're having a hard time with the paragraph, you're not really going to understand, at a paragraph level, you're not going to really understand the whole novel. But a lot of people jump to trying to, digest the whole novel at once, right? Because they want to be like experts. That's what experts can do. They can think at the level of the novel, right? But if you're just learning English, you want to think at the level of the sentence and then the paragraph.
Yeah. Well,
and then the chapter, and then, you build that back up.
Right now in my little room in Global Republic, I'm trying to help them understand how to explain the community mechanism in English. If I were to say community mechanism, do you know what that would mean?
No.
Exactly. So it's something that's abstract even when they say it in Japanese. And I was trying to figure out how to help them explain it. And then I realized as I was doing this that we needed to like not figure out how to explain it. I needed to help them figure out how to understand it first, right? To break it down into those parts. So we broke it down linguistically. What is a mechanism? What is a community, right? And then looking at the actual meaning of community mechanism as an economics term, which it is, and how does it work with these other things? And why might it need to work? How do those other things work in relation to it that would set it apart? Right? And then let's come back and actually explain what it is. Because people were trying to go too fast and saying, well, this is why we need it. But no, what is it? Right? And so again, breaking things down and going simply, right, can actually be so much more effective than racing ahead.
Yep. And so, business tip for the week. And I think for Monday, we'll regroup and maybe have some specific goals, feedback from marketing consultants. And maybe as we talk to him, maybe we can get a recorded conversation at some point.
That would be
That would be exciting. Anyway, but the tip of the day, I promised that we'd get back to how to decide what to do and how to prioritize. And this is a tip that I liked quite a bit from the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I mean, the Miracle Morning is like a simple set, or no, actually, this is the Miracle Equation. So the Miracle Morning was this first one about a good routine, you know, and like get up an hour earlier and read, exercise, journal, meditate, you know, whatever. So just like, you know, 6 things that like in the literature of improvement and help a lot of people have done, and that was successful. But then he wanted to do another one that's just moved from like an optimized day to like how do you undertake a big project and a big transformation. And his approach is really simple, but like the way he says the equation is unwavering faith and extraordinary effort. And you're just like, what does that mean? And like, okay, like that equation by itself, not very helpful. The interesting thing in the book is how he defines miracle, unwavering faith, and extraordinary effort, which are not in the exact ways you would describe. In many ways, just doing something every day is extraordinary because most people don't consistently do anything. So there
It's true,
you go.
though. It's true.
All right. But you know, one of the things he's talking about this in terms of like, he also frames like how do you choose what transformation you want?
Yeah.
Right. And his answer is whatever takes you closest to who you want to be. And I think like I can't answer that last one for anybody, like the who you want to be, but that is a good answer. And sometimes like who you want to be is someone not worried about money right now. Like that could be part of it. Like, you know, you have to answer like, you know, what takes you closest? Is it a paycheck? Is it, you know, is it a change in what you're working on or who you're working with? Or is it getting a consultant or in here or there? You're going to have to figure that out. But that is a pretty good central question. And this is an issue I run into with coaching sometimes where I get someone who says, I want to do X. And then when I talk to them about what they want in their life and who they want to be and what they want their life to be like, it does not look at all like X. And the interesting thing is I can never tell them that. Like sometimes I make the mistake of trying to communicate that. I'm like, you say you want X, but X is not Y and Z, or X is Y and Z, and you say you hate Y and Z.
Right.
Why, therefore, do you want to do X? Like, I want to do X, I just don't want to do Y and Z.
Yeah, but
kind of
Y and
thing.
Z are required for
Right,
X. So.
right. Like, how are you going to do X without doing Y and Z?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, what, you know, sometimes it's magical thinking, like, I just won't mind it. I won't mind Y and Z. I hate Y and Z now anytime I encounter them in my life. But if I have X thing I want, I magically won't mind them anymore. Like I think there's some magical thinking that comes in.
Yeah.
But you have to think about, you know, like, all right, who you want to be. And then this is going back to the 7 whys exercise. When you have something you think will take you there, you might ask why. Why do I want this thing? Why, you know, can I do this quickly? This is always like a difficult spot on the spot. So like, why do I want to go? Why do I want to get more money? Why am I focusing on getting money over building my business? Well, because it's hard to build 2 businesses at a time. We need to focus on one, and I would like the focus. And I know I can get money relatively quickly. Like that is a skill I have developed, which is great. After years of coding. So, all right, why do I want focus? Because I feel like I've been doing too many things in 2 different directions, and I haven't been doing any of them well.
Only 2?
Well, like, I guess multiple, many different things, and I'm not doing any of them as well as I want to. Like, why does that bother me that I'm not doing them well? Well, because on some level it's not sustainable as a family. You know, this is the 4th why, right? Because we could easily just burn through our savings, trying both to build companies at the same time and never reaching escape velocity, and or it could just take forever, right?
Yeah.
We could spend years trying to do it independently badly on our own, or we could pool our resources so that one person has everything they need to get it in a short time horizon. And, why is that important? That we have it now, or that, why not muddle through? I looked at our savings. We could do this for 6 more months. Why not do that for 6 more months? Because growth is important to me. And the moment I realize that I am not growing, this isn't going to pan out in whatever X time horizon, I want to change something. I want to try something new. And, why is growth important to me? That's kind of how I measure the value of my life. At the 7 whys, it's like my value as a person.
Yeah, now, I think that core value, right?
And I think there's a problem here, right? Which is if I'm not growing, I'm not a valuable human being. Oh no. Right? There's a defect in that. I'm not saying that that's right or perfect, that you get to enlightenment at your 7 whys, but now, I've kind of backed this up. I know how it ties into one of my most fundamental issues, and I can work on that from a couple different angles, right? One thing that will help is getting the money, right? So that I can facilitate our growth as rapidly as possible.
Yeah.
Transform our situation more rapidly rather than just muddling through. But I can also work on that from another end, which is there's a certain amount of anxiety I will never expel as long as I am trying, my base paradigm is I need to grow to be a valuable person rather than people just are valuable, right?
Yeah.
That's really hard to actually believe. I don't know many people who really, really, truly deep down believe that that people are inherently valuable.
Or especially when it comes to themselves,
anybody.
Yeah. I feel like I'm pretty,
right.
I'm not perfect, obviously, but I'm pretty good at seeing, right. Anybody and the president of the United States or whatever has the same inherent value as a human being as, a homeless person or something that people would generally see. But look how much more he does for the country. I'm like, no, he's a human being. He's a human being, right? They're the same. They're equal. But when it comes to myself, I always generally put other people higher or more valuable than myself, which is, again, I guess some of my own neuroses.
No, if you feel depression, anxiety, or almost any negative affect, the root of it is almost always that you don't feel you have enough value or life itself has enough value for it. And so it's when I say nobody actually believes, I think truly believes in a complete way that human beings have value in and of themselves, is because if you did, you would be tremendously peaceful all the time, even in adversity, even around jerks, right?
Yeah.
And so because whatever happens, you're valuable, they're valuable.
Yeah.
There's value, there's goodness going on just being, however people are being, right? That's kind of the Enlightenment philosophy. If you really understood that, that would be enlightenment.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's kind of a digression from the deep point, but that's an example of figure out what you really want and go deep, figure out why you want that, and that will help you identify which way to move. And so now that I know I have an overarching ethic of growth, there are limits to that, but generally if I want to aside from achieving enlightenment, which I can work on, that the project that is right for me is the one that will result in the most growth.
Yeah.
And the biggest growth opportunity for us is focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's good. It's a great exercise to really, again, when focus is an issue, to get that focus working for you.
So that's pretty much a mini coaching session that I might do with someone right there, which is wait, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do that? Back up to your alignment, to what's your core value. All right, let's look at that original opportunity. Does that align with it? What other opportunities align with it?
Yep.
All right, now pick one. What's the next step? That's a coaching session right there. So there you go, free coaching session. All right. Until tomorrow, make big changes until Monday.
Monday, yes.
Make big changes one small habit at a time.
Bye.